Former Texas DA is pleading guilty to criminal contempt for withholding evidence in a case. Authorities say that Ken Anderson sent an innocent man named Michael Morton to jail. Morton was wrongfully convicted in the 1986 murder of his wife. Morton spent nearly 25 years in prison before being exonerated by DNA evidence in 2011. His attorney says Anderson intentionally concealed exculpatory evidence that could have helped his client avoid conviction. Prosecutorial misconduct apparently happens a lot more often than maybe a lot of us think here. In Caldwell versus Mississippi, prosecutors misstated the law when arguing to the jury. And in Mooney versus Holohan, prosecutors knowingly used perjured testimony. Brady versus Maryland, prosecutors suppressed evidence favorable to the defendant that might have actually led to a not guilty verdict. And the U.S. versus Doyle, prosecutor there failed to disclose that the government had presented false evidence against the defendant. We've seen a lot of cases, especially with DNA now coming out, where innocent people are sent to jail. But there's a difference, Jason, and you've been on both sides of this, between a prosecutor mistakenly convicting an innocent person and knowingly keeping information or intentionally presenting false information to a jury. Is it a blurry line, or do you think it's black and white what is and isn't allowed?
It's black and white. It's anything that a defendant, that an accused would want to have that could help him in any way, you have to turn it over. And prosecutors know they have an obligation to seek justice, not to seek convictions. This is groundbreaking news. Prosecutors have enormous immunity, criminal, civil. You rarely hear prosecutors getting any type of issue with this type of act.
He got 10 days, okay, and I guess some community service he had to do. But, you know, Susan, it's funny. I think the public, they'll watch Law and Order, and they'll see these overwhelmed ADAs, district attorney offices, where they're doing the best they can, and that some information will come down through some technicality here. The guy will get off when they know that he or she was responsible for the crime. Take Hollywood into reality. How much discretion, authority does the DA's office have in doing this, and is it mistakes that lead to sometimes innocent folks getting sent away where evidence would have proved otherwise? Is that just, you know, something that didn't get presented at trial, that was a mistake that didn't get turned over to a defense? Or is this more conscious?
I don't think it happens by mistake, and certainly not in the case that we're talking about. And also, there's a more systemic problem, and that is prosecutors should make their files available to the defense. It should be open file discovery so that everything the prosecutor has, the defense has. And the problem with the Brady rule, the exculpatory evidence rule, is that prosecutors sometimes don't know what's exculpatory because they have such tunnel vision to prosecute and to demonize the defendant. So rather than letting prosecutors make a decision whether something is exculpatory, they should be turning over everything, all of the information to the defense. I hear prosecutors
at home, though, saying, wait a minute here. You want us to turn over every single thing that we have to you, even if it damages our case, even if we firmly believe that the defendant did this. But yet you guys, you'll know information, right? And you'll totally keep it from us. We're not talking about a two-way street here. Jimmy, you've been on both sides of this yourself here. Do prosecutors have a point here that you're now setting a standard where, not that it's impossible for them, but that this guy was, bad case makes bad law. There's a lot of innocent mistakes here, that now all of a sudden there'll be a different threshold for the DA or the ADA.
A witness tells you, my father wasn't home. At the time, you're prosecuting my father for killing my mother. What's the question?
Yeah.
Nobody cares if the prosecutor thinks the defendant is guilty. It's not your job. Your job is to prosecute. Your job is to be fair for both sides. Courts have said it since the time there were courts. Your job isn't just to get convictions,
You've been on both
it's to
sides
seek
again?
justice.
Does
Yes.
this happen more often than the public thinks?
I'm trying to get a number for you. There have been 24 wrongful convictions since 2000 in New York, and how many of them have you covered where it's all because of the failure to turn over exculpatory material? Or, you know, in Brooklyn, it's almost one a month that's getting overturned because of a false confession, with witnesses coming forward and talking about how they were promised and threatened and so on and so forth in order to give testimony.
Doug,
It
you
happens
think,
often
you think
enough.
10 days, do you think the fact that a DA is going to jail, right?
Yeah.
You speak to your old DA buddies, ADA buddies, do you think this makes a difference
Well,
going forward
let
for
me
other
just say
offices?
something. I can only speak for myself, but I learned from some of the best lawyers when I was in the DA's office that I've ever met in my life, where people that the directive was that when it goes against you as a prosecutor, you turn it over. A lot of times you're dealing with more junior assistants who may have problems interpreting what the rules are and they may get in trouble. But I would hate for anybody that listening to this conversation to think that prosecutors are like this judge that is going to jail. Do I think 10 days is enough? No. If a guy spent 25 years because he's been wrongfully convicted for a crime he didn't do because of this guy, I mean, I would hope that he would get life himself for what he did. But I would hope that people realize that a lot of these prosecutors who aren't making a lot of money, who are trying to learn a craft, are really trying to do the right thing. And I think a lot of us, we did that when we're prosecutors. Doesn't mean they make mistakes, though. They do make mistakes.
I agree entirely. The majority of prosecutors are doing the right thing, but
Yep. But
it
when they
happens
do the
often
wrong
enough.
thing here,
Look at the ramifications. Look at the
both
look
sides
what
should pay a
happens.
price. All right, when we come back, everybody, we're going to have a few real interesting stories. I want to get quick reactions to the table on as well. Stay with us.